This video is sponsored by War Thunder. Welcome to Kujari, a beautiful nation engulfed in a brutal civil war. Our country was divided, carved between three different factions vying for power. The East and Center were controlled by the regime, a corrupt and tyrannical government that oppressed the people it claimed to represent. The North, meanwhile, was controlled by Russian mercenaries, who'd invaded our homeland when the regime refused to work with them. They wanted our nation's liquid gold, and were willing to kill to get it. Finally, in the Southwest, you had the Rebel Federation, which I led. We were a union of multiple rebel groups. The Loyalists, who were loyal to me, the Royalists, who wanted to restore the monarchy, the Tribals, who simply loved fighting, and foreign mercenaries, who were just here fighting for money. We'd been waging an insurgency against the regime for months, but had recently seized territory and declared our independence. Our very existence was an insult to the regime, and not one they could tolerate. They'd planned a major offensive to wipe us out. Their mechanized units had been moved to the nearby outposts, and they had airborne units and air assets on standby at their airbases. They were going to launch a three-pronged offensive, hitting our airbase from both northern outposts and from the air. Unfortunately for them, we knew about the attack ahead of time thanks to a few well-placed bribes. We we couldn't let them win. I gathered the other rebel leaders, and we came up with a plan. Our airbase was wide open, and as such easy to attack and hard to defend. Our best bet would be to ambush the enemies before they could reach it, but we still had to leave enough men behind to resist the air assault, as we couldn't exactly ambush paratroopers. Because of this, we decided to split our forces. The Loyalists and mercenaries would stay at the airbase, the Tribals would head to Danishiwa to ambush the forces passing through there, and the Royalists would head north to this bridge to stop the enemies from crossing it. We had it all planned out. We thought we were ready for anything they could throw at us, but we were dead wrong. To start their attack, the regime hit the airfield fast and hard with airstrikes, destroying buildings and our anti-air vehicles.
Another MiG east.
We were taking casualties before the main assault had even begun. While their air force bombed our airbase, their grand assaults clashed with our men. The Tribals in Danishiwa managed to do decently, using the urban environment to their advantage. Though the Tribals were doing well, the Royalists at the bridge had a much rougher time. They dealt some serious damage, but the attack was bigger than expected. Having taken casualties, the remaining Royalists had no choice but to retreat. The regime troops that had been fighting now had a clear line to the airfield. This was bad. The Loyalists and mercenaries were still recovering from casualties. I couldn't order them to move. Instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my bodyguard Titan and rushed east to Azala, in the hopes that we could stall the assault. We set up in the town, but soon spotted a BTR making its way towards us. It was alone though, the rest of the convoy had stayed at the base. Titan aimed his AT and took the shot. He was dead, but he'd done it. The BTR was disabled. Its crew was still alive though, so I got to work. With the crew dead, I said goodbye to my dead friend and headed back to the airfield. I could have really used some aircraft of my own though, which is where this video's sponsor comes in. This video is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made that's available right now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile. In War Thunder, you'll command over 2,500 tanks, aircraft, helicopters, and ships, covering everything from the oldest biplanes to modern-day fighter jets and tanks. War Thunder stands out thanks to its insane detail. Not only does the game have amazing graphics, but also an extremely true-to-life damage modeling, where a single well-placed shell can take out an engine or a crew member, and with the game's X-ray view, you'll see exactly how the destruction happens. Personally, I'm a big fan of the in-depth customization options. There's thousands of camouflages, markings, and even community-made designs you can equip to stand out. So, if you want to join over 70 million players from around the world in epic PvP battles, get War Thunder today, you won't regret it. If you're new to the game or returning after 6 months away, and you sign up using my link in the pinned comment or video description, you'll get a massive bonus pack on PC and console, including premium vehicles, the exclusive Eagle of Valor decorator, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's only available for a limited time though, so grab it now. Now, back to Kujari. Unfortunately, things had gone from bad to worse in my absence. The regime's air assault had begun, and they'd spared no expense. There was over half a dozen aircraft in the sky, and dozens of paratroopers landing all around us. Our men were doing the best they could with their anti-air, and getting some good hits in, but we were heavily outnumbered. As I got closer, I realized paratroopers had overrun the western edge of the base. I'd lost too many men to let them keep it. After the firefight, I was quickly found by one of the mercenaries, and I teamed up with them. We set ourselves up on a trench and began laying down as much lead as we could across the airfield.
I'm bleeding for the revolution. What about you?
I've been shot in the head 3 times now.
Jesus. Oh my, okay, I'm getting inside.
The enemies seemed never-ending, but hope wasn't lost. The tribals had returned from Danishiwa, and their extra manpower was enough to overwhelm the remaining attackers, with some even surrendering. The fight wasn't over yet though. The regime had invested too much into this offensive, and couldn't back down now. They sent another air assault, hoping to overwhelm us. Unfortunately for them though, this time I had a ZU. The battle was over, and we'd won. The regime had sent the biggest attack they could muster, but it wasn't enough, and all they got for their efforts were millions of dollars in lost equipment, and their men killed. We didn't have time to rest though. We had to seize the initiative and strike back hard and fast. If we captured the 2 outposts north of our territory, not only would we gain a foothold north of the river, we'd also be buying our airbase some breathing room. We decided to split up, with the tribals and mercenaries targeting the eastern outpost, while myself and the Loyalists would target the western one. The Royalists, meanwhile, would seize the resource point between the two, spilling blood over the farmland once more. Thanks to our control over Mawa and Maiwa, we'd be able to hit the outposts from the rear, giving us the element of surprise. The Royalists were the first to reach their target. They drove straight up to the resource point and got to work.
To the right. The building's clear, hold the compound.
This is the Royalists. We are capturing the resource point. There is no enemies, we're raising the flag now.
While they finished up, the rest of us had only just begun our assaults. The western assault was hard fought. We used the foliage to get as close as we could, but the garrison's MGs were cutting us to shreds.
It's got hands!
Back up.
How many bullets am I tanking? Hold on, look at my body!
Oh my god, Max!
Somehow, despite being hit with 4 12.7mm bullets, I was still standing. Once I was done bandaging and had some morphine in me, I was back in the fight. By this point though, the rest of the Loyalists had pushed past me and seized the outpost. All that was left for me to do was to put up our flag. Meanwhile, the eastern attack had gone just as well. They'd taken a few minor casualties, and had some mental breaks.
I hate Kujari.
But they successfully took the outpost. Now that we had a proper foothold north of the river, we spread like the plague. Villages swore fealty to us, fearful of what we'd do to them if they didn't. Unfortunately, we weren't the only ones profiting off of the regime's weakness. The regime had pulled a lot of men and equipment off their front line with the Russians for their assault on us, and since those men were dead, the Russians smelled weakness. They launched a major offensive towards the heartland of our country. seizing outposts, resources, and factories. The regime just about managed to stem the bleeding at the Battle of Kubel airfield, and even counterattacked the Russians in the north. But the writing was on the wall. The Russians had doubled their territory, and now even bordered us. I summoned my rebel groups back to our HQ so we could discuss what to do, and most showed up. The Royalists, though, were noticeably absent. That's when I found out they were deep in regime territory, attacking an outpost to the east of our airbase. The Royalists felt like they'd failed during the defense of the airbase, since they'd had to retreat during their ambush on the northern convoy. They wanted to regain their honor, and so attacked an outpost solo, risking life and limb on a daring night raid. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they didn't let that stop them. Through sheer tenacity and force of will, they fought their way into the outpost, and killed every regime soldier that got in their way.
Done.
Once the base was secure, they raised the rebellion's flag and began building defenses. Believe it or not, but taking the outpost was the easy part. Defending it was a whole other matter. The regime had lost so much territory that they were going to be fighting tooth and nail for every inch of ground, and so launched a massive counterattack. Enemy jets launched missiles at the base, trying to soften it up. Gunships strafed them, employing shock and awe tactics. Transport helicopters dropped off soldiers nearby, and paratroopers were landing all around them. The Royalists wouldn't retreat again, though. Their honor was at stake. They would either beat the attack, or they'd die trying.
Check cash. Check casualty.
Aaron's okay.
The Royalists were doing exceptionally well. They did have to give ground and fall back into a shack, though, as they'd taken casualties. From inside the shack, they fought, killing regime soldiers trying to breach the base. After a while of fighting, the sky went quiet. The helicopters had left. The Royalists pushed out and saw the regime troops running for their lives. They had actually won. They'd taken an outpost on their own and beaten an entire counterattack. Now, you might think this was good news for me, but it was actually very bad. The only reason I was the leader of the Federation was because my Loyalists were the biggest group with the most prestige. But this victory made the Royalists extremely popular overnight. Recruits were now looking to join them instead of my Loyalists, and some village leaders even asked to talk to the Royalist leader. I could see my power and influence slipping away in front of me, and I knew I had to act to keep it. Now sure, the Royalists had taken an outpost alone, but I was going to take an entire damn region. While the tribals rested, I ordered my Loyalists and the mercenaries east. We were going to conquer the entire south, without the help from our allies. I knew the regime was in an extremely weak state after the events of the previous day, and perhaps just weak enough for us to be able to pull this off. Our first mission was to take the seaport north of the outpost, so we formed a convoy and headed straight towards it. Once we were close, we dismounted and went in on foot. It wasn't long before our men were opening fire, trading shots with the regime troops. When we got closer, an enemy machine gunner opened fire and killed our Humvee gunner. He was the first man we lost on this offensive, but his sacrifice wouldn't be in vain, and I made sure he was avenged.
Got him.
As we pushed in deeper, I spotted an armed regime boat that had been beached. They were using it to engage our men, so I silenced it.
Diamond Dog, what's your sit rep?
It wasn't long before the base was cleared out. The garrison had been pretty small, and we'd only lost one man. With the seaport under our control, we manned it up and moved east. Our next target would be the town of Kujari, which housed a military outpost. Kujari would be a much tougher nut to crack. Its garrison was bigger than the seaports, and there would be a lot less cover we could use in our approach. We ended up opting for a mixed strategy. Would wait till nightfall when most of the garrison was asleep, and then would push in from 3 directions. The mercenaries would push in from the north, getting as close as they could using the trees for cover. The Loyalists would meanwhile attack head-on from the southwest, using an M113 we'd captured back when we first took the airbase. Meanwhile, me and my new bodyguard Bonfire would steal a civilian vehicle and sneak into the town from the south, acting as a Trojan horse of sorts. Soon it was night, and the Loyalists were in position. They opened fire, and the plan was a go. Me and Bonfire drove into the town from the south, while the Mercs stormed the north. Thanks to the darkness, we managed to make it all the way inside before the regime troops realized we weren't civilians. By then, though, it was much too late for them. We'd created enough chaos for the Loyalists to push into the city, and together with them we cleared it out, massacring the sleep-deprived soldiers before they could properly register what was going on. The town had fallen, putting us one step closer to controlling the entire south. The only obstacle left in our way was the regime airbase north of us. This was the very same airbase that had sent wave after wave of attackers at our own one. Taking it would cement the Loyalists in legend, but be very difficult. We'd taken a few casualties over the course of our eastern campaign, and so if we wanted to take this airbase, we'd need something to even the odds. Luckily for us, though, we had both a T-72 tank at our disposal and a mortar. We'd captured both of them when we'd taken our first airbase, but would refrained from using them, since losing them would be a serious blow to the movement. We felt like we had no choice now, though. If we wanted to succeed without the tribals and royalists, we'd just have to risk it. This assault would be more elaborate than our last one. First of all, we'd be striking the airbase with our mortar, using explosives to do as much damage as possible, and then smoke to try and cover our advance. Once the mortar was spent, it'd be the infantry and tanks' turn. The tank would neutralize any MGs and vehicles it spotted, while the infantry would push in and clear out the buildings. Blade, my head loyalist and my right-hand man, would command the tank. His time in the Foreign Legion had given him just enough experience to know how to operate it. Because he was in the tank, though, I'd have to push in with the infantry, leading my men by example. If I died in the attack, I'd become a martyr. Though if I'm honest, I'd really rather live. We were soon in position, right outside of the airbase. Our mortar man opened up, firing his explosives into the base. While we waited for him to finish, we fired on any static MGs we could see. Once the mortar went silent, we pushed forward. We weren't ready for the autocannon, though. There was a hostile Bradley in the airbase, an infantry fighting vehicle with enough firepower to wipe our entire attack out. With a few well-placed shots, it had disabled our tank's tracks and turret, leaving us defenseless. Or at least that's what I thought, until I saw an absolute madman with an IED attached to his car, storming directly at it.
Oh my god, somebody just rammed it!
What a hero!
Oh!
A hero!
He did what we needed! Forward!
With the Bradley down, we pushed forward, invigorated. We were fighting in CQC, close enough to see the whites of their eyes. We were clearly making the regime troops panic, as they began firing their mortars on their own base. It was reckless, but effective.
Oh my god.
I'd been on the other side of the road and so was alive, but a lot of my men got pulverized by the blasts. Once I'd medicked myself, I pushed across the road and found my right-hand man, Blade, unconscious. I couldn't lose him though, not after everything we'd gone through, so I started treating him as quickly as I could, doing everything to make him wake up.
You're not dying on me yet.
It worked. He was soon up and fighting again,
up!
back from the brink of death.
Get in the building with me!
We pushed into a building together and fought from its windows, moving and firing at targets in every direction. I even spotted one of the mortars and avenged my fallen brothers. The rest of our men were soon rallied and were pushing through the rest of the base, clearing it out. With the fighting dying down, we put up our flag and claimed victory. With the fall of the airbase, the entire southern region was now under our control. Young men from the villages would have liberated lined up to join my men. My Loyalists were once again the top dogs in the Rebel Federation. Our rebellion was now on par with the regime, and was perhaps even bigger, which meant that it may be time to turn our attention to the invaders and liberate our people from foreign oppression. Before you go, don't miss out on War Thunder. Play for free on PC, consoles, or mobile using the links in the pinned comment or video description. New and returning players on PC and console get a massive bonus pack, but only for a limited time, so sign up now. A special thank you to my channel members: Medix Lion, Elzek Beck, Scout Trooper, Belmont, Flanella, Cretus, Fornicator, Colonel Oddball 27, Dransky Firefly, Dalcomar, Alec Trakler, Taylor Lowe, King Yeager Blackhand, Brian Bailey, Corey Dawson, and Altonio. You all make this possible, so thank you so much for your support.